welcomes you all this evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I've prepared a special collection of night shift stories for you to enjoy. So, sit back, relax, and let the darkness take over as we dive into some chilling tales that are sure to send a shiver down your spine. Family Tragedy Story. On a chilly Thanksgiving weekend in 2022, the Grant family gathered in their ancestral home. In the heart of Vermont. The sprawling estate, nestled amidst a forest of bare trees, had been the site of countless family celebrations. This year, however, the gathering carried an air of finality. The family matriarch, Eleanor Grant, had decided to sell the house, marking the end of an era. The news brought the entire family together, from near and far, for one last hurrah. Eleanor was a vibrant woman in her early 70s. Though age had softened her once sharp features, her commanding presence and warmth remained intact. Her eldest son, Martin, a successful attorney in Boston, arrived with his wife, Laura, and their teenage daughter, Emily. Eleanor's middle child, Nora, an artist living in New York City, was accompanied by her boyfriend, Greg. The youngest of the Grant siblings, Caleb, a quiet and reserved writer, had made the longest journey from Portland, Oregon. Caleb had been distant from the family in recent years, and his appearance at this gathering was both unexpected and welcomed. As the family settled into the house, laughter and stories filled the air. The kitchen bustled with activity as everyone pitched in to prepare the Thanksgiving feast. Emily played the piano in the living room, her melodies weaving through the chatter and clatter. Eleanor watched her family with a bittersweet smile, savoring the fleeting moments of togetherness. After dinner, as the family gathered around the fireplace, Eleanor made an announcement. She had sold the house to a local developer who planned to turn it into a bed and breakfast. The news was met with mixed emotions. While Martin and Nora understood her decision, Caleb seemed troubled. He excused himself and retreated to his childhood bedroom, a space untouched by time. That night, the tranquility of the estate was shattered by an unthinkable act. A loud crash echoed through the house, followed by a blood-curdling scream. The family rushed to the source of the commotion, Eleanor's bedroom. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. Eleanor lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling around her. A shattered lamp lay nearby, and the window was wide open, curtains billowing in the icy breeze. Martin immediately called 911, while Laura ushered Emily and Nora out of the room. Caleb stood frozen, his face pale. The police arrived swiftly, securing the scene and beginning their investigation. Eleanor's death was ruled a homicide, and the once happy gathering turned into a nightmare. Detective Sarah Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, took charge. She methodically questioned each family member, searching for clues. Martin recounted the events of the evening, emphasizing that everyone had been together until bedtime. Nora mentioned seeing a shadowy figure outside the window earlier but dismissed it as her imagination. Caleb, however, was reticent, offering vague answers that raised suspicions. As the investigation progressed, the police uncovered a series of unsettling details. Eleanor's financial records revealed a recent withdrawal of a large sum of money. A search of Caleb's belongings unearthed a set of keys to the house, which he claimed Eleanor had given him years ago. Additionally, his laptop contained a draft of a story eerily similar to the events of the murder, raising questions about whether it was a work of fiction or a sinister plan. Despite the mounting evidence against Caleb, Detective Hayes was not convinced of his guilt. She delved deeper, uncovering long-buried family secrets. Eleanor's decision to sell the House had been motivated by more than financial necessity. She had been receiving threatening letters, pressuring her to relinquish the property. The letters were unsigned but hinted at a grudge dating back decades. The breakthrough came when a fingerprint analysis linked the letters to Greg, Nora's boyfriend. Under questioning, Greg confessed to writing the letters, claiming he had been coerced by his brother, Daniel, a local developer with a shady reputation. Daniel had orchestrated the threats to force Eleanor into selling the house but insisted he had no involvement in her death. Greg's confession shifted the focus of the investigation, but it left more questions than answers. If Daniel had no role in the murder, who had killed Eleanor? Detective Hayes revisited the evidence, piecing together the puzzle. A second fingerprint analysis of the lamp revealed a match: Laura, Martin's wife. Confronted with the evidence, Laura broke down. She confessed to killing Eleanor in a moment of rage. She had discovered that Eleanor planned to leave the proceeds from the house sale to a charity rather than her children. Overwhelmed by anger and a sense of betrayal, Laura had confronted Eleanor, and their argument had escalated into violence. The revelation devastated the family. Martin was heartbroken, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his mother. Nora and Caleb grappled with the betrayal, their grief compounded by the realization that the family's bonds had been irreparably damaged. In the weeks that followed, family tried to pick up the pieces. Caleb, inspired by the tragedy, began writing a memoir about his mother and the events that unfolded. Nora channeled her emotions into her art, creating a series of paintings that captured the essence of loss and resilience. Martin focused on supporting Emily, ensuring she felt secure despite the upheaval. Laura's trial was swift, and she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her absence left a void in the family, but it also served as a reminder of the fragility of human connections. The Grant family, though fractured, found solace in their shared memories of Eleanor and their determination to honor her legacy. The ancestral home was eventually converted into a bed and breakfast, as Eleanor had intended. Its new owners preserved its history, displaying photographs and artifacts that told the story of the Grant family. Guests often remarked on the house's warmth and character, unaware of the dark chapter that had unfolded within its walls. Years later, on the anniversary of Eleanor's death, the Grant siblings reunited at the bed and breakfast. They sat by the fireplace, sharing stories and laughter, just as they had done during their final Thanksgiving together. Though the family would never be the same, they had found a way to move forward, bound by the enduring spirit of their matriarch. "Will you go out with me?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and something darker. Melissa was too scared to say anything other than a firm no. She walked away quickly, praying he would finally get the message. Instead, he escalated. Eric began following her after school, tracking her to her bus and even trying to find her address. One day, he cornered her by her locker and whispered a chilling threat. "I'm coming to your house on Thanksgiving. I'll bring a gun, and I'll kill your whole family." Melissa froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream but couldn't find her voice. That night, she told her parents everything. Her father, a former Marine, immediately called the police. When the police visited Eric's house, they found what they initially thought was a firearm. Thankfully, it turned out to be an airsoft gun, but the damage was done. Eric's intent was clear, and the principal finally took action. He was expelled and sent to a school for troubled youth. Melissa breathed a sigh of relief, but the incident left her shaken. It would take years. before she could walk to her locker without glancing over her shoulder. 5 years later, Melissa was in high school, preparing to graduate and begin a new chapter of her life. She had managed to move past the trauma of her middle school years, or so she thought. But the universe had other plans. She met Jason during her junior year, and their relationship started innocently enough. Jason was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in her. For a while, Melissa thought she had finally found someone she could trust. But as their senior year progressed, Jason's behavior became increasingly possessive. When Melissa received her acceptance letter to a college in another state, she decided it was time to break up with Jason. They were heading in different directions, and she didn't see a future with him. Jason didn't take the news well. At first, he called her incessantly, begging her to reconsider. When she didn't answer, he showed up at her house, pleading with her parents to let him in. Melissa's father had to physically escort him off their property. But Jason didn't give up. He began showing up at her work, sitting in his car for hours just to watch her. He sent her flowers with cryptic messages like, "We're meant to be together," and left voicemails saying he couldn't live without her. Melissa blocked his number, but Jason always found another way to contact her. Thanksgiving weekend was the breaking point. Melissa had returned home from college to spend the holiday with her family. Late one night, while everyone was asleep, she heard a noise downstairs. She grabbed her phone and crept to the top of the stairs, her heart pounding. There, through the front window, she saw Jason trying to force his way in. She called 911, whispering her address to the dispatcher. Her father woke up and grabbed his hunting rifle, ready to defend his family. By the time the police arrived, Jason had fled, but the damage was done. Melissa knew she wasn't safe. The next day, Jason attacked her while she was walking downtown with a friend. He appeared out of nowhere, shouting accusations and blaming her for everything that had gone wrong in his life. Before she could react, he punched her, knocking her to the ground. Her friend screamed, drawing the attention of bystanders who called the police. Jason was arrested and sentenced to a few months in jail. For Melissa, it was a bittersweet victory. She used the time to move an hour away, change her number, and rebuild her life. But the fear never truly left her. Years later, Melissa sat by the window of her apartment, sipping a cup of tea as she watched the snow fall. She had come a long way since those dark Thanksgivings. She had a job she loved, supportive friends, and a sense of independence she had fought hard to earn. But the scars of her past lingered. She carried a taser in her purse and always checked her surroundings when walking alone. She had taken self-defense classes and installed extra locks on her doors. Melissa refused to let fear control her life, but she also refused to be unprepared. Writing her story had been cathartic. It reminded her of how far she had come and how much strength she had gained. She hoped that by sharing her experiences, she could help others recognize the signs of unhealthy behavior and find the courage to seek help. As the clock struck midnight, Melissa set down her pen and closed her journal. She had turned her pain into purpose, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. Thanksgiving was no longer a reminder of what she had lost but a celebration of what she had overcome. Melissa's story is one of resilience, strength, and survival. It serves as a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure and rebuild, even in the face of unimaginable fear. And while her past may always linger in the shadows, her future shines brightly, a beacon of hope for Anyone who has ever felt trapped by their circumstances. The Haunting of St. Augustine Academy story. I had been working security for nearly a decade by the time I became assigned to St. Augustine Academy, an institution nestled in a remote area just outside the city of Denver. The academy was built on the grounds of what had once been a large asylum in the 1800s. And its legacy was a blend of history and mystery. When I first started, I was only in my early 20s, and my agency didn't trust the less experienced guards with such a prestigious post. But after a year of hard work, late-night shifts, and proving my abilities, I was given the night shift at St. Augustine's. At 22, I was assigned to a role that most of the other security officers coveted. My shift started at 9 p.m. and ended at 5 a.m., Monday through Saturday. It wasn't exactly an easy assignment. St. Augustine was an enormous campus, with aging Gothic-style buildings and long, winding corridors. It was the perfect setting for a horror movie, but I didn't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. The academy itself had a long and troubled history. It was originally established in 1875 to house children with disabilities, many of whom were abandoned by their families due to illness, disability, or societal stigma. Over the years, the school expanded, and a network of underground tunnels was constructed to transport supplies and staff between buildings. But as the school's population grew, so did the number of roomers, children, staff, and even patients from the original asylum were said to have died in tragic circumstances, and the small cemetery on the grounds had been a site of whispered tales about restless spirits. Growing up in the area, I had heard the stories about strange occurrences, eerie sounds in empty classrooms, flickering lights in long-forgotten hallways, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. But I didn't buy into any of it. To me, it was all just folklore. But all that changed during my third month on the job. It was 2 nights before my 21st birthday when things took an unexpected turn. The school was closed for the semester break, and there were no students or teachers around. It was just me, the occasional janitor, and the faint hum of the old heating system. One of the first things I noticed was how eerily quiet the campus felt. The kind of silence that presses down on your shoulders and fills your ears with the hum of your own thoughts. But that night, it wasn't the silence that made my skin crawl, it was the shadow. While doing my routine rounds, I walked past the gymnasium and checked the boys' locker rooms. I was scanning the dimly lit hallway when I saw it, a solid black figure darting past the showers. It was a human shape, but it moved too quickly to be human. My heart raced as I rushed toward the locker room, fully expecting to confront an intruder. But when I entered, the place was empty. The lockers were locked, and there was no sign of anyone. I checked the entire building twice, even went as far as checking all the doors, but found nothing. I tried to shrug it off as my imagination getting the best of me. After all, it was late, and I was alone in a huge, isolated building. Maybe I was just tired. But something felt off. That night, something about the air felt heavy, like the walls were closing in, pressing in on my mind. But I ignored it, chalking it up to stress. The real turning point came later that week, on the night of my 21st birthday. The shift change went as usual. The janitors were finishing their duties, the halls were quiet, and everything seemed calm. But when I reached the carriage house, a massive, old structure where the school stored equipment, things started to get strange. I had always hated checking that building. It was dark, with narrow stairwells and cramped rooms filled with old desks, books, and furniture. It was the kind of place where old memories seemed to linger in the dust. As I ascended the creaky staircase to the top floor, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure standing at the far end of the room. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a person, but it was standing in an odd way, too still, almost unnatural. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the stone walls. I didn't know what I was expecting to happen, but my instincts told me to confront whoever or whatever this was. I rushed forward, my boots thudding loudly on the wooden floor as I sprinted toward the figure. But when I reached the spot where I'd seen the figure, there was nothing. No person. No movement. Just the cold emptiness of the room. I cursed under my breath and quickly moved to check the door. The door to the first floor was locked, and the bolt was secured. My mind raced as I began to think it might have been a trick of the light, but something about it felt too real. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I had a sinking feeling that something was off. It wasn't until I started making my way down to the service tunnels that things took a darker turn. The tunnels had been there for as long as the academy, originally designed to move supplies between buildings. Over the years, they had expanded and become labyrinthine. It was common knowledge among the staff that the tunnels weren't safe to navigate alone, especially at night. But there I was, standing in front of the entrance. My flashlight flickered weakly in the dark, and the air in the tunnels felt unnaturally cold. I hesitated for a moment, knowing I wasn't supposed to go down there without supervision. But curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I would just take a quick look. So, I stepped inside. The tunnels twisted and turned, and the walls felt like they were closing in on me. I had no idea how long I had been walking, but it felt like hours. My heart thudded in my chest as the darkness pressed against me. Then I heard it. A soft, childlike voice. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. "Happy birthday, Mr. Officer," the voice whispered, so close I felt a chill run down my spine. I spun around, my flashlight illuminating nothing but the dark, empty walls of the tunnel. My stomach churned with fear. I didn't know what it was or who it was. I tried to move, but my legs felt heavy, like I was stuck in place. Before I knew it, everything went black. I woke up hours later, disoriented and confused. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light coming from the tunnel entrance. I was sitting in a corner, my flashlight lying on the floor beside me. My head throbbed, and I couldn't understand how I had gotten there. I looked at my watch. It was 5 a.m. The cold sweat on my back was the first clue that something was wrong. As I stumbled out of the tunnel, I was met by the concerned faces of my supervisor, the maintenance director, and 2 police officers from the local department. They were all shaking me, their voices filled with alarm as they asked where I had been. Apparently, I had missed my 3 a.m. check-in, and I had been gone for over 3 hours. I was escorted out of the tunnels, and as we exited the carriage house, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The surreal nature of what had just happened began to sink in. My supervisor was less than pleased, and the maintenance director seemed especially concerned. But they didn't ask any more questions after that. Later that day, I was reassigned to another post at a different facility, after a medical check cleared me for duty. But I never returned to St. Augustine Academy. Whatever had happened in those tunnels, whatever I had encountered in the dark, stayed with me. To this day, I can't explain what happened. I don't know if it was the product of stress, lack of sleep, or something supernatural. But one thing is certain, something in that school, something in those tunnels, had a way of reaching inside your mind, making you question reality itself. And as for the voice that wished me a happy birthday, Mr. Officer, it still echoes in my memory, chilling my bones every time I think about it. I don't know if the academy is haunted, or if it was just a bad night. But whatever it was, I'll never forget it. And I never went back. The haunting at the old carriage house story. When I was younger, I worked as a janitor at a small maintenance facility near the outskirts of town. The pay was nothing to brag about, barely enough to cover the rent, but it was the sort of job where I was left alone most of the time. The building itself wasn't much to look at, an aging structure that had been repurposed multiple times. It once served as a carriage house for a wealthy family, and later as a storage facility for old vehicles, but by the time I started working there, it was used solely for maintaining the city's fleet of buses. The buses were mostly modern, large, utilitarian machines designed to ferry commuters across town. However, there were a few older buses that still stuck around. These were the buses that didn't get much attention, used only on days when the newer ones were in for repairs. They were ugly, old double-deckers with peeling paint and rust on their frames. Most of them sat in the back lot, untouched, gathering dust. But there was one bus in particular that always stood out to me. It was an ancient thing, with a faded red exterior, and it smelled like old leather and mold. And, for reasons I couldn't explain, it always felt wrong. It wasn't just the way it looked, it was the strange things that seemed to happen whenever I worked in or around it. At first, I thought it was all in my head. It was an old building after all, and old buildings tend to creak and groan at night. But over time, I started to wonder if something more sinister was going on. I worked the late shift most nights, starting around 7 p.m. and finishing by 3 a.m. This meant that when I was cleaning, I was often by myself, surrounded by the eerie silence of an empty parking lot and the dim flicker of old fluorescent lights. It was during these late hours that I began to notice the odd sounds that seemed to echo through the facility. It started with soft footsteps, barely audible at first, like someone was walking upstairs in the old carriage house portion of the building. It was a regular noise, always around the same time, when the clock hit about 11 p.m. I tried to ignore it at first, chalking it up to the building's age. But the sounds persisted, becoming more pronounced as time went on. Sometimes, when I was working on the second floor, I would hear them coming from the ground floor, the unmistakable sound of shoes scraping against the floorboards. I'd rush downstairs, expecting to find someone, maybe another worker or a stray animal, but every time, I'd find nothing. The doors were locked, and the place was completely empty. And then there were the other things. The strange creaking sounds in the walls, like someone was turning a crank, but there was no machinery in the building that could explain it. And on several occasions, I'd hear what sounded like the faint clinking of metal, almost like someone was dragging chains across the floor. I'd rush around, checking the hallways and the parking lot, but there was never anything out of place. Just the quiet, empty stillness. But it wasn't until one particular night that I had an experience I couldn't shake. I was working in the old bus garage, sweeping up the dust and debris that had accumulated around one of the old buses. It was the red double-decker that always made me feel uneasy. As I swept under the chassis, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. A figure, dark and indistinct, moving just inside the doorframe of the bus. At first, I thought it was another worker, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. My heart started to race. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the empty space where the figure had been. My eyes darted around the room, looking for any signs of movement. The place was completely still. But then, as if on cue, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs from the old carriage house. The noise was so clear, so real, that for a moment, I thought it was someone playing a prank on me. But the stairs leading down from the carriage house were locked, and the whole building was empty. Or so I thought. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound continued, each step growing louder. Closer. I grabbed a broom and tried to calm my nerves. When I reached the foot of the stairs, I stopped. There, at the top of the staircase, I saw something, a shadow, tall and indistinct, standing at the very top. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I couldn't make out any details, just the vague outline of a figure. But I knew something was wrong. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs felt frozen in place. And then, as if sensing my fear, the figure moved. It wasn't a fast movement, but it was enough to send a chill running down my spine. Slowly, the shadow descended the stairs, step by step, until it was halfway down. I bolted. I don't remember how I managed to move, but I ran out of the room, heart pounding in my chest. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, trying to steady my breath. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the image of that figure standing at the top of the stairs. The next night, I returned to work. I couldn't explain it, but I felt drawn back to that bus, as though something was compelling me to face whatever it was that haunted that place. The cleaning was routine, but every noise made my heart race. Every creak in the floorboards made me jump. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I decided to confront it. I stood at the foot of the stairs that led to the old carriage house and looked up. The darkness above seemed to swallow the light. But I knew I had to go up there. I had to see what was causing the strange happenings. With a deep breath, I took the first step, then another. The staircase creaked under my weight, echoing in the silence. The higher I climbed, the more oppressive the air seemed to get. It felt thick, heavy, like the atmosphere itself was suffocating me. When I reached the top, I stood still for a moment, listening. That's when I heard it again, the sound of footsteps. I turned, slowly, and saw it, the shadow, moving in and out of the darkness. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was something else, something old, ancient. A figure that had been trapped in this place for years, maybe decades. Its form was indistinct, like smoke or fog, but it had a presence that was undeniable. I could feel it, pressing in on me, making the air thick with dread. The figure moved toward me, slowly, and I found myself unable to move. It was as though my body had been frozen in place. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, in a voice that was both whisper and thunder, it spoke. "You shouldn't have come." And that was it. My legs finally obeyed, and I turned and fled. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could, not stopping until I was outside in the cold night air. I never went back to that building after that night. The old red bus, the one that had always made me feel uneasy, was eventually taken away. And sold. But the stories from that place lived on. Other workers came and went, and rumors of the haunting in the old carriage house persisted. Some believed it was the spirit of the original owner, a man who had died in a tragic accident. Others thought it was something older, something that had been buried in the building's walls long before it was even a bus depot. As for me, I moved on. But I never forgot the shadow that stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. I never forgot the warning, whispered in the dark. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. Hey everyone, Mort here. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to tonight's stories. I really hope you enjoyed them. If you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you made it all the way to the end and aren't subscribed yet, well, that'd be awesome too. I put out new videos every week, so I hope you'll stick around. A huge thanks to my amazing members and patrons. You guys rock, and your names are right there on the screen. If you like this video, I think you'll enjoy this one too, so why not give it a watch? Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.